Maria and her mother, Mrs. Grace, lived in a modest home on the edge of town. Their small house was humble but clean, with every corner reflecting Mrs. Grace's dedication to her family. Life wasn't easy, but they shared a bond rooted in love and resilience. Mrs. Grace, a widow, worked tirelessly as a cleaner at the prestigious Hillcrest Academy, an elite private school known for its wealthy and privileged students. Hillcrest Academy was a world of stark contrast. The children of business tycoons, politicians, and celebrities walked the hallways in designer clothes, carrying the latest gadgets. Meanwhile, Mrs. Grace quietly cleaned the classrooms and polished the floors, ensuring the school sparkled for its affluent students. Despite the disparity, Mrs. Grace took pride in her work, often reminding Maria, "There's dignity in hard work, no matter how small it seems." Maria, her mother's pride and joy, was a bright, ambitious girl. She excelled in academics and was known for her quick thinking and determination. Her dream was to become a lawyer, to fight for people like her mother who often went unheard. Despite her circumstances, Maria carried herself with quiet confidence, earning the admiration of her teachers. She was determined to break free from the cycle of poverty and make her mother proud. But life at Hillcrest wasn't easy for Maria. As one of the few students from a less privileged background, she often felt like an outsider. The stark divide between her reality and that of her classmates was painfully obvious. The school's rich boys, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb, embodied everything Maria despised about entitlement. They were handsome, arrogant, and used to get in their way. Their favorite pastime was mocking those they deemed beneath them, and Maria, being the cleaner's daughter, was a frequent target of their cruelty. "You're just the janitor's kid," Ryan sneered one day, blocking her path in the hallway. "Why even bother coming here? Shouldn't you be helping your mom scrub toilets?" Ethan and Caleb laughed, their voices echoing down the hall. Maria clenched her fist but said nothing, walking past them with her head held high. She had learned to endure their insults, finding solace in her mother's words of encouragement. "Don't let them get to you," Mrs. Grace would say. "You're stronger than they'll ever be." Though Maria kept a brave face, the words stung. She hated the way they dismissed her and her mother's sacrifices. Still, she channeled her pain into her studies, letting it fuel her determination to succeed. Maria often stayed up late at night, poring over books, dreaming of the day she could stand in a courtroom and prove her worth. Her mother, exhausted from long days of work, would sometimes sit by her side, running a tired hand through Maria's hair. "One day, Maria," she would whisper, "you'll show them what you're capable of. They'll see the power of a cleaner's daughter." This promise became Maria's beacon of hope, a reminder of why she could never give up. Hillcrest Academy's annual function was the grandest event of the year, a dazzling showcase of student talent and achievements attended by parents, faculty, and prominent members of the community. The function was a testament to the school's reputation, a night filled with performances, awards, and speeches. For weeks, the campus buzzed with excitement as students prepared for the big day. Maria, despite her quiet demeanor, found herself at the center of attention. She had excelled in her studies, topping the class and impressing the faculty with her intelligence and dedication. As a result, she was chosen to deliver a speech on perseverance and gratitude during the function. The honor was a significant moment for Maria, a recognition of her hard work and resilience. When Maria told her mother about the invitation, Mrs. Grace's eyes welled up with pride. "You deserve this, Maria," she said, holding her daughter's hands tightly. "I'll be there, front and center, cheering for you." The day of the function arrived, and the school auditorium was transformed into a glittering venue. Parents in elegant attire mingled in the crowd, while students in their best outfits prepared backstage. Maria wore a simple dress her mother had saved for months to buy. Though not as lavish as the designer clothes worn by her classmates, Maria's outfit reflected her sincerity and grace. Mrs. Grace arrived early, seating herself in the back corner of the hall. She wore her cleaner's uniform, having just finished her shift, but her face glowed with pride. She watched as other parents chatted and took pictures, her heart swelling with joy at the thought of her daughter standing on that stage. Maria stood backstage, clutching her speech tightly. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She could hear the laughter and chatter of the audience, a mix of encouragement and intimidation. Finally, her name was announced, and she stepped onto the stage. The spotlight illuminated Maria as she approached the microphone, her confident posture masking the butterflies in her stomach. She began her speech with a calm and steady voice, thanking her teachers and mother for their unwavering support. She spoke about the importance of perseverance, how challenges could be turned into opportunities, and how gratitude gave her the strength to overcome obstacles. As Maria spoke, her words captivated many in the audience. Her humility and wisdom resonated with the faculty and a few parents who nodded in agreement. But not everyone was impressed. In the back row, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb exchanged mischievous smirks. The boys, still smarting from Maria's earlier comeback in the hallway, had planned a cruel prank to humiliate her publicly. Ryan nudged Caleb, who pulled out his phone and connected it to the auditorium's AV system. As Maria reached the most heartfelt part of her speech, the giant screen behind her flickered to life. Suddenly, a video played, showing Mrs. Grace scrubbing toilets and sweeping floors at the school. The captions read, "Cleaner by day, mother by night, meet Maria's role model." The audience erupted into laughter. Parents whispered to each other, some amused, others uncomfortable. Maria froze mid-sentence, her face draining of color. She turned to see the video playing behind her, the image of her mother, her pride and strength, mocked so cruelly. The laughter felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper into her heart. Mrs. Grace, sitting in the back, gasped audibly. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the humiliation unfold. She wanted to run to Maria, to shield her from the ridicule, but her legs felt like lead. All she could do was sit, her hands trembling, as the crowd continued to laugh. On stage, Maria's hands clenched tightly around the microphone. Her vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to stand tall. The boys in the audience snickered, whispering to each other about how they had finally put her in her place. The room began to quiet as Maria's silence stretched, the weight of the moment sinking in. Slowly, she raised her head, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "That's my mother," Maria said, her words cutting through the heavy silence. "She's the strongest person I know. She works harder in one day than most of you will in a lifetime." The audience shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her words beginning to sink in. "She scrubs floors and cleans toilets with dignity because she knows what it means to earn an honest living. That's something none of you, who hide behind your parents' money, can ever understand." A stunned silence fell over the auditorium. Maria's gaze swept across the crowd, her voice growing stronger. "I stand here today because of her sacrifices. I'm proud to be the cleaner's daughter because my mother's strength is the reason I've come this far." Some parents began to clap, their faces a mix of guilt and admiration. A few teachers nodded in approval, their respect for Maria growing. Even some students, previously snickering, looked down at their hands, ashamed of their laughter. Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb, however, sat fuming in their seats. Their plan to humiliate Maria had backfired spectacularly, leaving them feeling exposed and enraged. Ryan whispered harshly to the others, "She's going to regret this. No one talks to us like that." Maria stepped away from the microphone, her heart pounding. She had faced her fears, but the humiliation lingered. She glanced toward the back of the room, where her mother sat with tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met, and Mrs. Grace gave Maria a small, proud nod. As Maria walked off the stage, applause erupted behind her. But while some celebrated her bravery, the storm brewing in Ryan and his friends' minds was just beginning. Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb sat in the back seat of Ryan's car after the school function, fuming with rage. Their plan to humiliate Maria had backfired in the worst possible way. Instead of breaking her, she had stood her ground, turning the crowd's attention against them. They couldn't forget the look of defiance in her eyes or the applause she received. To them, it was a public embarrassment they couldn't tolerate. "No one humiliates us like that," Ryan muttered, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Ethan nodded, his voice low but venomous. "She thinks she's better than us? Let's see how tough she is when we're done with her." Caleb smacked cruelly, already imagining ways to make Maria pay for standing up to them. The boys, fueled by anger and entitlement, began to plan their revenge. A few days later, Maria walked home after staying late at school to finish an assignment. The streets were quiet, the fading daylight casting long shadows. Her mind wandered to the humiliation she had endured and the strength it had taken to speak out. She had hoped that her words would finally earn her respect, but she couldn't shake the lingering fear of retaliation. As she turned a corner near a deserted part of the neighborhood, the sound of a car engine grew louder behind her. She glanced back and recognized Ryan's car immediately. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickened her pace, clutching her bag tightly. The car slowed to a crawl, matching her steps. "Hey, Maria," Ryan called out, his voice laced with mockery. "Need a ride? It's the least we can do for the cleaner's daughter." Maria ignored him and kept walking, her pulse racing. She could hear laughter from Ethan and Caleb inside the car. Suddenly, the car sped ahead and stopped in front of her, blocking her path. The boys got out, their expressions dark and menacing. "Where do you think you're going?" Ethan sneered, stepping closer. Maria took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "Leave me alone," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. Ryan laughed coldly. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone, Maria. Do you really think we'd let you get away with that?" Before Maria could react, Caleb grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. She struggled, shouting for help, but the street was deserted. The boys forced her into the car, muffling her cries as they sped off. Maria's heart sank as she realized the danger she was in. They drove to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, a place shrouded in darkness and isolation. Maria fought desperately, but the boys overpowered her, their laughter echoing off the crumbling walls. What followed was a nightmare Maria could never have imagined. The boys, driven by cruelty and rage, committed the unspeakable act of gang rape, leaving Maria broken in body and spirit. When they were done, they threw her to the floor like discarded trash. "You should have stayed silent," Ryan said coldly, his face devoid of remorse. The boys left her there, laughing as they drove away, their act of violence leaving scars that would never heal. Maria lay on the cold, dusty floor for what felt like hours, her body aching and her mind numb. The world around her seemed to blur as tears streamed down her face. She felt broken, violated, and utterly alone. But somewhere deep within her, a spark of resilience flickered. Slowly, painfully, she crawled to her feet and stumbled out of the building. The journey home was agonizing. Each step felt heavier than the last, but Maria refused to stop. When she finally reached her doorstep, Mrs. Grace opened the door, gasping in horror at the sight of her daughter's battered state. "Maria," she cried, pulling her into her arms. Maria collapsed, her sobs breaking through the silence of the night. At the hospital, Mrs. Grace held Maria's hand tightly as the doctors treated her injuries. She wanted to cry, to scream, but she knew she had to stay strong for her daughter. Maria, still in shock, barely spoke a word. Her once bright eyes were now filled with pain and despair. When Maria finally recounted the events to her mother, Mrs. Grace's heartbreak turned to anger. "We will not stay silent," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We'll make them pay for what they've done." The next day, Mrs. Grace and Maria went to the police station to file a report. But as soon as the names of Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb were mentioned, the officers' demeanor changed. The boys' families, powerful and influential, had already intervened. The case was dismissed before it could even begin, with the police claiming there wasn't enough evidence. News of the incident spread quickly, but instead of sympathy, Maria faced judgment and scorn. Some parents whispered that she had provoked the boys by standing up to them. Others accused her of lying, unwilling to believe the truth about their privileged sons. Maria and her mother returned home, crushed by the injustice of it all. Mrs. Grace tried to console her daughter, but Maria's pain ran too deep. As she sat in her room, staring at the walls, one thought consumed her: justice. She didn't know how, but she vowed to herself and to her mother that she would make them pay for what they had done. The storm brewing inside her was just beginning. The days following the assault were the darkest of Maria's life. She stayed confined to her small room, the once vivid light in her eyes extinguished. The world she had known felt shattered, and the weight of her trauma was overwhelming. Each time she closed her eyes, the faces of her attackers haunted her, their mocking laughter echoing in her ears. The injustice of it all cut the deepest. The legal system, which she had once believed in, had turned its back on her. The police refused to take her claims seriously, dismissing her as another troublemaker who had dared to stand up against powerful families. Whispers and judgment followed her everywhere in town. People she had thought might support her looked away, uncomfortable to acknowledge the truth. Maria fell into despair, questioning everything she had once held dear. She stopped eating, speaking, and even attending school. Mrs. Grace, heartbroken but determined, stayed by her side, refusing to let her daughter give up. "Maria," she said one evening, kneeling by her bed, "I know you feel broken, but you're stronger than this pain. You have the power to fight back, not with hate, but with justice. Don't let them win." Those words planted a seed of resolve in Maria's heart. She sat in silence for hours after her mother left the room, staring at the cleaning cloth her mother had left on her desk, a symbol of her mother's strength and the sacrifices she had made. As the moonlight illuminated her face, Maria made a silent vow: she would not let this define her. She would rise, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been silenced. Maria knew she couldn't stay in the town where her attackers ruled with impunity. With her mother's blessing, she left, boarding a bus to a city far away where she could start anew. The farewell was tearful but filled with hope. "One day, Mama," Maria said, holding Mrs. Grace tightly, "they'll regret what they've done. I promise you." The city was a world of opportunities, but for Maria, it was also filled with challenges. She worked long hours in a small cafe, saving every penny to fund her education. During the day, she attended free workshops and tutorials, learning whatever she could about law and justice. At night, she pored over books borrowed from the local library, immersing herself in legal cases and courtroom strategies. Her determination became her fuel, driving her forward even when exhaustion threatened to pull her back. Maria's efforts paid off when she earned a scholarship to a prestigious law school. She was initially nervous about returning to an academic setting, but her resolve quickly overtook her fear. She excelled in her classes, becoming known for her sharp mind and fierce determination. Professors admired her dedication, and her peers respected her focus. Law school wasn't enough for Maria, though. She knew that if she was going to take on the powerful, she needed more than just a degree. She began studying investigative techniques, attending workshops on journalism and digital forensics. Maria learned how to track financial records, uncover hidden documents, and trace illicit activities. She became an expert at finding the kind of evidence that could destroy reputations and bring justice where the law had failed. Over time, Maria started to piece together a plan. Using the skills she had acquired, she began to investigate Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb's families. From a distance, she observed their business dealings and social connections, noting every detail that could be used against them. She hacked into public records, piecing together a web of corruption that tied their families to illegal activities, tax evasion, money laundering, and bribery. Maria's transformation was not just intellectual but emotional as well. The shy, quiet girl who had once been mocked at school was gone. In her place stood a confident, fearless woman. Maria had learned to carry herself with strength, her voice steady and commanding. The fear that once paralyzed her had become a distant memory, replaced by an unshakable determination to fight for justice. Through it all, Maria never forgot where she came from. She kept her mother's old cleaning cloth folded neatly in her drawer, pulling it out whenever she felt overwhelmed. The cloth reminded her of her roots, her struggles, and her mother's unwavering strength. "This is my foundation," she would whisper to herself, clutching the cloth tightly. "I will never forget." Maria's work began to bear fruit. She compiled detailed dossiers on Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb's families, uncovering layers of corruption that stretched far beyond what she had imagined. Their parents, once untouchable figures in the community, were involved in fraudulent business deals and political bribery. Maria documented everything meticulously, ensuring that every claim was backed by undeniable evidence. Her pursuit of justice became her life's mission. Maria reached out to others who had been wronged by these families, offering to help them seek justice as well. She found people who had been silenced by fear or paid off to stay quiet, convincing them to share their stories. Slowly but surely, Maria built a network of allies, each of whom contributed to her growing arsenal of evidence. As Maria's plan took shape, she allowed herself moments of reflection. She thought often of her mother, who had stayed behind in their small town. Though they couldn't see each other often, Mrs. Grace's letters were a source of encouragement. In one letter, Mrs. Grace wrote, "Maria, I see your strength in every word you write. You've become the woman I always knew you could be. Never stop fighting for what's right." Those words carried Maria through her darkest moments, reminding her of her purpose. She wasn't just seeking revenge, she was fighting for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced or ignored. Years passed, and Maria's transformation was complete. She was no longer the victim, she was a warrior. Her mind was sharp, her skills unmatched, and her resolve unbreakable. She had rebuilt herself from the ashes of her trauma, using her pain as a foundation for her strength. Maria stood before the mirror one evening, holding her mother's cleaning cloth in her hands. She thought about the girl she had been, the laughter she had endured, and the humiliation she had faced. But now, she saw someone different staring back at her, a woman ready to take on the world. As she folded the cloth and placed it back in her drawer, Maria whispered, "It's time." She was ready to return to her hometown, armed with the knowledge, skills, and evidence she had spent years gathering. Maria wasn't the same girl who had left. She was stronger, smarter, and determined to ensure that Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb would finally face the consequences of their actions. The storm she had been preparing for was about to break. Maria stepped off the bus onto the familiar streets of her hometown, a place that had once been her world but now felt so much smaller. 5 years had passed since she had left in despair, but she returned as a new woman. She was no longer the helpless girl mocked and humiliated by the powerful, she was now a force to be reckoned with, a successful lawyer and investigative journalist, armed with the truth and determined to dismantle the lives of those who had wronged her. Clutching a folder filled with evidence she had spent years compiling, Maria looked around at the town she once called home. The memories of her humiliation and trauma lingered, but they no longer weakened her. Instead, they fueled her resolve. Maria's first step in her plan was to hit Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb's families where it hurt most, their reputations. She knew their power came from the illusion of respectability, built on wealth and social connections. She had spent years gathering evidence of their corrupt dealings, fraudulent business practices, tax evasion, bribery of officials, and even connections to illegal activities. Using a pseudonym, Maria began leaking the documents online. The files included bank statements, contracts, and emails proving the boys' families had engaged in unethical and illegal behavior. Each leak was timed meticulously, ensuring the news would gain maximum traction. Local news outlets picked up the story first, but within days, national media began to investigate. The headlines were damning. Prominent businessman accused of tax fraud. Corruption scandal rocks Hillcrest's elite families. Uncovered, the dark secrets of the wealthiest families in town. Public outrage grew with every revelation. The families who had once been untouchable were now under intense scrutiny. People who had once looked up to them turned against them, questioning their integrity. Even their closest allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with the growing scandal. Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb watched helplessly as their families' reputations crumbled. Their parents scrambled to do damage control, hiring PR teams and lawyers, but the damage was already done. Maria, watching from the sidelines, felt a sense of vindication. This was only the beginning. With their reputations in tatters, Maria moved to the next phase of her plan, legal action. She returned to the same police station that had dismissed her case years ago, this time armed with irrefutable evidence. She filed lawsuits against Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb for their crimes, including the assault she had endured. Maria knew the boys' families would try to use their influence to silence her again, but she was prepared. Over the years, she had built connections with lawyers, activists, and journalists who were willing to support her case. She worked closely with her legal team, ensuring that every piece of evidence she had collected was admissible in court. The boys' families fought back fiercely, using every trick in the book to delay the trial and discredit Maria. They claimed she was fabricating the allegations out of revenge, but Maria refused to be intimidated. She stood her ground, knowing that the truth was on her side. As the trial date approached, the case gained widespread media attention. Reporters covered every development, shining a light on the corruption and privilege that had allowed the boys to escape accountability for so long. Maria's story resonated with people across the country, many of whom admired her courage and determination. The courtroom was packed on the day the trial began. Maria sat confidently at the plaintiff's table, flanked by her legal team. Across the room, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb sat with their lawyers, their once arrogant expressions now replaced with fear and unease. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they knew it. Maria's testimony was the centerpiece of the trial. As she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She recounted the events leading up to the assault, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She described the humiliation she had endured, the nightmarish attack, and the years of injustice that followed. Her words painted a vivid picture of the pain and resilience that had defined her journey. "I was silenced once," Maria said, her voice unwavering as she looked directly at the boys. "But not anymore. The truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply you try to bury it." The defense attempted to discredit Maria, bringing up her family's poverty and claiming she had ulterior motives. But Maria was ready. Her legal team presented the damning evidence she had collected, including the boys' own admissions of guilt captured in old text and emails. Each piece of evidence drove another nail into the coffin of their defense. The boys' parents, seated in the gallery, watched in horror as their sons' lives unraveled before their eyes. Their influence and wealth, which had shielded them for so long, were now powerless against the truth. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb were found guilty of multiple charges, including assault, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the judge sentenced each of them to lengthy prison terms. Maria sat motionless for a moment, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then, as the boys were led away in handcuffs, she stood and walked out of the courtroom, her head held high. The world outside the courthouse was a whirlwind of flashing cameras and reporters, all eager to hear her thoughts. Maria faced the crowd with poise, her voice clear and strong. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about justice, for every person who has been silenced, for every woman who has been told her pain doesn't matter. Today, we proved that no one is above the law." The fallout was swift and far-reaching. The boys' families faced additional investigations into their corrupt dealings, leading to fines, asset seizures, and further legal troubles. Their social standing, once untouchable, was irreparably destroyed. The families left town in disgrace, unable to face the community they had once ruled. For Maria, the victory was bittersweet. She had fought for justice and won, but the scars of her experience remained. Still, she felt a sense of closure, knowing that she had fulfilled her promise to her mother and herself. At Hillcrest Academy, the aftermath of Maria's story brought about profound change. The school administration, under public pressure, enacted new policies to prevent bullying and discrimination. Anti-bullying campaigns and workshops became a part of the curriculum, ensuring that no student would have to endure what Maria had faced. The school also introduced scholarships and support programs for underprivileged students, inspired by Maria's resilience and courage. Maria's story spread far beyond the borders of her town, capturing the attention of national media. She became a symbol of justice and empowerment, using her platform to advocate for equality and support survivors of violence. She shared her journey at events and conferences, her voice resonating with audiences who saw in her a beacon of hope. One day, Maria received an invitation from Hillcrest Academy to speak at their annual function, the same event where she had once been humiliated. Standing on the stage that had once been the site of her deepest pain, Maria looked out at the audience, now filled with young students who had heard her story. She began her speech with a quiet strength. "Years ago, I stood on this very stage, mocked for being the daughter of a cleaner. They laughed at my mother's hard work and tried to make me feel small. But today, I stand here to tell you this: dignity comes from who you are, not from what you have. True strength lies in perseverance and integrity, not privilege." The audience erupted into applause, the message striking a chord with everyone present. Maria's words became a rallying cry for change, a reminder that courage and resilience could overcome even the darkest of circumstances. After the event, Maria went to her mother's room, a place she hadn't entered in years. She stood in the doorway for a moment, clutching the old scarf that had once belonged to her mother. With tears streaming down her face, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother in a tight embrace. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. "They know now. They'll never forget." As Maria stood and walked away, a sense of peace washed over her. The weight of her past had lifted, replaced by the quiet pride of knowing she had honored her mother's memory and fought for justice. She smiled, knowing her mother would be proud of the woman she had become. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe our channel for more interesting tales.